Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tearing into a story I'm sure you think you already know inside and out. We're going to bring William Shakespeare's absolute blueprint for romantic tragedy to life, but we're not just treating it like some dusty piece of classic literature. Nope, we're breaking down the actual mechanical plot of Romeo and Juliet, treating it like a super relatable everyday disaster. Because honestly, when you strip away all that flowery 16th century language, what you're left with is a literal masterclass in how a series of perfectly timed, seemingly small mistakes can snowball into utter catastrophe.
To really get into the headspace of these characters, I want you to think about this for a second. Have you ever had a totally crucial, time-sensitive email go straight to your spam folder? Or, maybe your phone died at the exact worst possible moment when you were trying to coordinate a meetup, and that one tiny miscommunication just completely derailed your entire day? Imagine that exact, agonizing modern frustration, but multiply the stakes astronomically. Instead of a missed lunch date, we are talking about life and death. That sickening feeling of helpless frustration when technology or timing just completely fails us, that is the exact emotional engine driving the entire second half of this play.
All right, let's jump right into the groundwork of this 400-year-old story with Section 1, The Ultimate Missed Connection.
Penned by Shakespeare somewhere between 1595 and 1597. At its core, this is the story of two young lovers in Verona, Italy. But as you know, it is definitely not a lighthearted rom-com. And what's wild is that this entire epic, world-shattering disaster actually unfolds over just a matter of days. From the jump, the narrative uses this brutal chain of violence and deep misunderstandings to craft the ultimate story of doomed romance. And the harsh reality? It's only through the tragic deaths of these two teenagers that their warring households finally put an end to the fighting. I mean, talk about a heavy price for peace.
So let's peel back the romance for a second and look at the actual social structures at play here in Section 2, Anatomy of the Feud.
The rigid society of Verona is completely defined by one central, inescapable conflict. You've got Romeo's family, the Montagues, pitted directly against Juliet's family, the Capulets. To make this make sense today, think of these families like two fiercely opposing, mega-corporate competitors fighting for a monopoly, or even deeply entrenched, incredibly hostile political factions. There is absolutely no middle ground. You're either on their side or you're the enemy. It's a completely zero-sum game, and this deeply toxic environment is the inescapable backdrop for every single thing that happens next. And when you're living in a pressure cooker like that, certain themes are bound to explode. The whole narrative is violently driven by youthful, rebellious passion just smashing into unyielding social constraints. You've got love pushing right up against generational hate. You have individual desire running headfirst into these incredibly heavy, rigid demands for family honor. These kids are just trying to operate on emotion and freedom, right? While their families are strictly operating on legacy, pride, and these ancient rules. It is quite literally a recipe for an explosion. Shakespeare leans into this clash brilliantly by constantly contrasting light and darkness. And it's not just about, day versus night. It's this powerful thematic tool to explore the crushing tension between private desire, what these kids desperately want for themselves in the safety of their own hidden world, and public duty, the dark, heavy expectations society is shoving down their throats out in the open. They are completely trapped between these two realities.
So, how does this toxic trap actually snap shut on our young lovers? Let's break down the mechanics in Section 3, Ingredients of a Tragedy.
Over the course of 5 acts, this disaster builds like a terrifying line of dominoes. It kicks off with a secret marriage orchestrated by Friar Lawrence, basically a desperate, risky hack to bypass the family feud, but almost immediately that triggers Step 2. Sudden violence and Romeo gets banished, which then forces Step 3, this wildly complex, frankly terrible plan to reunite them using a sleeping potion. And of course, that tragically leads us right to Step 4, their actual deaths in the tomb. The play blends beautiful poetry with this agonizing dramatic irony to create what feels exactly like a slow-motion car crash. We can see the crash coming from a mile away, but we are completely powerless to stop it.
And that awful, helpless feeling brings us to the real core of the tragedy, fate and chance. In this story, fate isn't some abstract mystical magic hovering in the clouds. It's that terrifyingly real-world reality where pure chance, a delayed messenger being just a few seconds too late at a tomb, completely obliterates a life's trajectory. These elements play such pivotal roles, heavily symbolized through omens and just plain bad timing. It's this brutal reminder that no matter how carefully you plan your life out, you are always at the mercy of chance.
Which brings us to our final stretch today, Section 4, An Enduring Cultural Blueprint.
The sheer, universal relatability of this perfectly timed disaster is exactly why this story still hits so hard today. I mean, the language of the play has completely infiltrated our everyday speech. Even if you haven't read a single word of Shakespeare since high school, you know exactly what someone means when they say a situation involves star-crossed lovers, or when they argue that a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. We're casually using 400-year-old vocabulary to describe our own modern romances and breakups because the emotional core of it is just so incredibly spot on.
And the influence goes way beyond just a few catchy phrases. The cultural impact is absolutely massive. It's inspired literally countless adaptations across theater, classical ballets, operas, and iconic films. From traditional retellings to super stylized modern updates like the 1996 Romeo plus Juliet movie. It serves as this universal touchstone for anyone exploring youthful love and impulsive, reckless emotion. Every single generation finds a new way to adapt it because the mechanics of the story are just so fundamentally human. So, the big takeaway here, this play ultimately established the definitive blueprint for the modern concept of romantic tragedy. It completely cemented the idea of portraying raw, unfiltered passion, smashing directly into unyielding fate and deep societal division. Whenever you watch a modern movie or read a book where young love is crushed by a divided society or just impossibly bad timing, you are looking at the direct descendants of Romeo and Juliet.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought. We've talked about how this play functions like a relatable, everyday disaster, just magnified to life or death stakes. So take a look around at the world right now. 4 centuries later, how often do we still see rigid societal divisions and youthful passion tragically colliding right in front of us? The outfits might have changed, the technology is definitely different, but the human tragedy, that remains exactly the same. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep questioning the blueprints behind the stories we tell.